Welcome back. My name is Corinne Phillips, and this is Fresh Pea Cooks. Today is January 31st. We are in the dead of winter here in the Pacific Northwest, and I want to take you out into the garden and show you why winter could be the most important season for gardeners. Upon first inspection, it might look like nothing's really growing here, but underneath this layer of straw are the very first signs of awakening. I've pulled back some of the straw to reveal a few of the cabbage or brassica starts that I planted from seeds a couple months ago. I'm seeing the first shoots of my winter garlic that I planted popping through the soil. My rhubarb is starting to spring to life. I have a few flowers growing. There really is a riot of activity going on just under the soil. Now, for those of you accustomed to traditional gardens, my garden looks nothing like a traditional garden. There are no raised beds, there are no rows, there are really no plots of vegetables per se, and yet everything in this garden has value, both edible value for us and ecological value for the bees, the butterflies, and the soil. When we first bought this house, I erected a big fence around the garden, not because I wanted a fence, it was more of a temporary barrier to keep the deer out, because I wouldn't have a garden if I had open access. But after removing the trees and seeing how expansive the garden looks rolling down off the hills, I need to put a barrier up, but I don't want to fence it in. So I'm going to utilize the principles of permaculture, specifically forestscaping or edible forest planting, to create natural barrier over the years so that I can eventually take all of my fencing down. So what is permaculture? Permaculture is a style or a concept of gardening that looks at the architecture of our natural world and mimics it, both in design and the beneficial relationships among species. Not just animals, not just me as an eater and a tender to the garden, but also the soil and plants that have beneficial properties for one another. Because in the garden, healthy soils and a diverse ecosystem are your absolutely best insurance against predators and pests. And as an organic gardener, that is very important to me. So my primary concern is the health of my soil, because healthy soils mean healthy plants. Healthy plants mean more nutrition for you. So in creating this natural barrier, it's not going to happen overnight. I'm going to have to plant these trees, and it's going to be years before I can probably remove any sort of fencing and actually rely on the natural systems to keep deer at bay. But I also don't want to plant a bunch of yummy stuff inside, and so the deer are tempted to come inside because there's nothing on the perimeter for them to eat. So I'm going to be planting a whole outside fence of edibles that the deer will enjoy. I first came across the concept of food forest or an edible forest about a decade ago, and I was so excited about it because as a gardener I have so much to tend in the garden. The thought of landscaping my property was just too much. I don't have the means for a gardener, and I'm not willing to give the time up to maintain such a huge plot of land. So for me, the idea of planting edible plants that benefit the bees, the birds, the deer, ourselves, in and amongst the conifers and the oaks here on our property was kind of the answer I'd been looking for. Being guided by permaculture has really made me think about utilizing not just the low beds in the ground, but the high, up above spaces that not only create sunblocks in relief for plants below, but also a lot of these trees have really elaborate root systems, and many of them are nitrogen fixing. So these are trees that anchor the soil, that draw water up from below, create canopy, ensuring microclimates for plants that are planted underneath or in the perimeter of the canopy. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we kind of have a pseudo-Mediterranean maritime climate. But there are dry spots. Now, I live right on the cusp. The mountain is there, and it's green that way, and it's dry desert that way, and we are on that last little band where it starts to get a little dry. So our primary trees are conifers and oaks, the waxy, leafy trees that do really well in long, dry summers and very wet winters. So having said that, it's really important as a gardener to create a microclimate, little microclimates throughout my garden that will ensure that plants that maybe aren't perfectly suited for my zone will thrive. For instance, I've planted plum that's native to California that needs just a little bit warmer climate than we have here. It requires an 8, and I'm a 7B. I've planted it right up next to the brick foundation of our fireplace on the south side of our house. So the fireplace brick serves as a heat sink by that south summer sun. So it gets all of the sun and all of the light, heats up during the day, and maintains that temperature just a little bit warmer than other parts in the garden. Now, when I say winter gardening is just as important as summer gardening, what I mean is when it's all covered in snow out here, I can see where the snow is melting first, indicating the warmer parts of the garden. Now, when we have a south wind, a lot of times the wind will heat up the rocks and the first beds will dry out and warm up the quickest. So how that translates in the summer is it's going to be drier and hotter. So anything that needs more warmth, like tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, are going to thrive in this warmer, drier bed. Through observation, we can kind of cheat nature a little bit by creating our own microclimates within our garden. For those of you interested in permaculture, this is my favorite book. It was written by an Oregonian, so it's really applicable to me here in the Pacific Northwest. Gaia's Garden, and I'll put a link to that in my Amazon store. Under books, I have a category just for gardening books, and this is one of my favorites. In this book, Toby talks about nurse plants that actually can take a dry environment like I have here with really rocky soils, and they can actually bring fertility and change the microclimate in your garden. I've written down a few examples of nurse plants, and I'll just read them off for you so you can get an idea of what these plants do and how they help aid fertility. Now, for me, planting my live fence around the perimeter of my garden, I'm going to utilize a lot of these nurse plants because the soil has been completely barren and completely dry and unfertilized and unimproved for years. Maybe, I don't even know, maybe always. And so it's really important that I plant in a variety of plants that not only fix nitrogen and improve the soil, that provide shade, that are drought resistant, and also have beneficial or edible fruits for the animals. Some of the nurse plants that thrive in my environment are elderberries that grow wild around here. I make jelly from them. I use them to flavor kombucha. I dry them. I make this little cold tincture for cold and flu season out of their juice. They're wonderful. If you've never had elderberry cordial, you are in for a treat. You make it with the little delicate white flowers, and the perfume of it is summer in a glass. It's so delicious. So elderberries will be going in, flowering quince, which is not only beautiful as a cut flower to bring in the spring, it's an early bloomer that attracts bees, and it has little bitter fruits that you can use in alcohol. You can extract pectin from them, and the deer and the animals enjoy them as well. Black locust is a hardwood that's a nitrogen fixer, so if you have a lot of space and you want a really, really quality hardwood, that would be a wonderful choice for you. Mulberry trees, another nitrogen fixer with edible fruit. I'm definitely going to plant a few of those. Wild lilacs, drought resistant, bee food. The bees love it more than just about anything. And it grows wild all over my area, and the fragrance is really fantastic, and they don't need additional water. So these are some of the plants that are considered nurse plants because of their beneficial properties. I hope I've given you a new way to see the winter garden and to utilize the information that you can only access now so that you can choose plants for years and years to come. Thank you for being here, and I will see you all in the next video. Hi, cheeks. Hi, cheeks. Hi, my baby. And for my fellow gardeners out there, February means one thing: a mailbox full of seed catalogs. Truth be known, it is the only junk mail that I really enjoy. So I pulled a video out from the archives of what I do and what my process is when I order seeds for the kitchen garden. How I go about choosing, selecting, organizing, and making a plot map of my entire garden to minimize my waste and maximize the variety of plants that go into each bed. And for those of you interested in Gaia's garden and learning more about permaculture, there's a link to my Amazon store, shopfreshpea.com. All my gardening books will be under a subcategory under books. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you on the next video.